We're back for another episode of the Battery Podcast from Siemens Digital Industries. I'm your moderator, Nick Finberg, and I'm joined by our host and battery expert, Puneet Sinha. Today, we have a very interesting guest, a self-described storyteller for the world of batteries, Roger Aktins of Electric Vehicles Outlook in the UK. We split our conversation into two parts, and in this first half, we'll be covering the evolving battery markets around the world, particularly in Europe and Asia. Welcome to the podcast, Roger. It's great to have you here. But maybe for the people who don't know what you do, would you mind talking a little bit about your background and what brought you to immerse yourself in the world of battery?
Yeah, sure. I'm absolutely, delighted to do that, Nick. Thanks for inviting me. Well, I've been in automotive for 40 years, 20 years in and around electric vehicles, 10 years working for myself, and since a moment, which perhaps we'll come on to, in February 2019, I knew nothing really about batteries, mining, critical minerals. But there was a moment in time that suddenly arrived unexpectedly, and it's changed my narrative, changed my storytelling, and given me a very strong and keen focus on what I think is the fundamental part of both the electric vehicle revolution and the energy revolution.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. Puneet, you were the one that kind of asked to have Roger come onto the show. Would you mind talking a little bit about what brought the two of you together and why you thought he'd be such an interesting guest for our audience?
Absolutely. So first of all, Roger is a person I've been connected to on LinkedIn for some time. I've been gaining insights into some of the commentary he has been doing on LinkedIn. But in person, I had a chance to meet with him when we both of us were at Battery Show Asia. We both were part of the advisory board and part of the plenary session that happened. And I was immediately struck by the passion and that Roger brings and the worldview that he's bringing, connecting the world of battery, looking in the larger arc of things. So, and he's an awesome person to talk to. So I thought it would be a great opportunity for the audience of Siemens Battery Podcast to listen to Roger, for us to have a dialogue, understand his perspective, what views he is gathering, collecting as he is going and talking to executives and decision makers and influencers across the whole battery value chain. And one thing that definitely impressed me the most, one of the things about Roger is that for him, he is looking at battery, which is a value chain, which is very much the way we are thinking about battery in Siemens. It's not about cell or pack or which system it goes into. He has a very holistic view of from the materials and chemistries to cell and pack engineering, manufacturing, a system that he needs to go and become part of, supply chain traceability, recycling. So a great perspective he's bringing for the industry, and I'm very excited for our audience and personally for myself to be engaging with Roger on this platform.
Well, to that end, we just had IAA recently. Would you mind talking a little bit about what happened out there? Any interesting conversations you had, Roger?
Yeah, but can I, before I say anything about what happened in Munich last week, just thank Puneet. You've really... I've got a lot to live up to now, given what you very kindly said, so I hope I'm not going to disappoint anybody. Okay, yes, last week, IAA Mobility. Let's remember why it's called that and what it is. It is a mobility show. It was the third one they've had, and it used to be the German car show, the German auto show. It was in Frankfurt for many, many years. And then some, I think, visionary people 6 years ago decided that it should be more embracing, more holistic, more about where particularly cities are going, and it's not just about cars. So it's rebranded, rechristened and recreated as IAA Mobility. And this was the third one in Munich. It was tremendous. Why? There was just clear evidence of not just ambition, but product, services, business models, especially from the Germans or from the Europeans, to be more accurate. But after the German auto industry looking like a boxer in the ring that's been punched in the face over and over, punched in the face with COVID, punched in the face with tariffs, punched in the face with the Chinese growth of EVs, punched in the face with the 2035 deadline. It looked like a boxer about to fall down on the ground and be knocked out for the count. But this event had a bit more of something unexpected. The boxer went back to the corner over the last couple of years, got toweled down, a little bit of a pep talk with the team, and is now back up in the ring. Still got a big adversary, still got, when it comes to batteries especially, the might and power and dominance, particularly of China. But let's not forget Japan and Korea. Because when we talk about batteries, it's so tempting to talk about CATL and BYD and Eve and a few others. But, there are tremendous companies in Japan and likewise in Korea. So, what did I see? Well, the marriage, I'd like to announce a marriage. The marriage between mobility and energy. And the person conducting that marriage is the battery. The battery is bringing those two parties together like never before. And we've seen that by BMW showing bidirectional charging proposition, Volkswagen, bidirectional charging proposition, Porsche showing wireless charging. And, we didn't see, and maybe they were there and I missed them, I'm not sure. We didn't see NIO, we didn't see the battery swap side of things. But, that's another part of the architecture that's now being assembled to increasingly manage renewable energy stock, to balance and manage energy, renewable energy particularly, but energy wherever, and learn some pretty important lessons from the recent past, particularly from the scenarios to what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. Really exciting and plenty of energy. That's the one word I came away with in my mind, energy, that you now see a bit more ambition, lots of collaboration, but a sense that there is a purpose to this. We're not just going to give up and get bashed in the face again and fall down and be knocked out. That, there's a bit of a fight back going on.
And if I can just add, what what you just said, marriage between energy and mobility, that's awesome. That's a perfect sentence to say, to describe not only the present, but also the future of where this thing is going, right? And as you said, that it's the battery that is bringing the two sides together. You mentioned things in the automotive world, but also if you look at it, the other side of the story is all the energy storage, right? So when you look at the equation of energy, right? In the equation of energy, as renewable quotient is growing, that is demanding a lot more need for batteries to be part of that energy mix, to part of that battery equations, the energy equations. And then with all this advent and demand that is exploding for AI data centers, yes, it is going to need a lot more electricity because those AI data centers are power hungry, right? But one thing that is less talked about, but is very critical in everybody who is engaging in the world of data centers, is not just the amount of joules and watts, it also the quality, because of that energy or the transient nature of it. For example, if you look at data centers and you think one job is finished and another job is going to come after a fraction of a second, in a simple way, it can cause up to 40-50% reduction in the energy demand for a fraction of a second, because how the jobs are switching, because that AI demand is that power hungry. So a lot of the companies with what they are also dealing with is not only that they need a lot more electricity, but also the quality of electricity when they need it, and to minimize that implications of this switching of 50% of electricity in a fraction of a second that can brown a whole grid. And that's where batteries are needed more than ever. to make that the energy demand smooth. And and that is an area, if you look at Tesla, and Tesla with their Tesla Energy business unit, they have been pioneering this whole thing around how will they take the same battery architecture, more or less, that is going in vehicle. How can they bring it for energy storage, be it at the residential scale or at a commercial or grid scale? And that is a direction that I'm seeing a lot more companies moving in that, and that is also same part of the statement you said, marriage of energy and mobility. In past, we have always seen, batteries or other energy sources powering mobility. But what I'm seeing and very excited about is how these mobility companies, automakers, how are they gonna go and say, can they go and be part of the solution of the energy world, especially as the data center, AI data center exploding. So it's and again, as you said, the element that is making this marriage happen is battery. So it's exciting times ahead.
Yeah, it is. And I'll give you some examples. BYD and Octopus Energy here in the UK. You've now got BMW and E.ON in Germany. You've got the Volkswagen Group with Otovo, which is a solar company in Scandinavia. So it's beginning to make you think, at what point, if ever, maybe not, the auto companies can become energy companies. And it also starts to make you think, well, who owns the battery? If the battery becomes an asset rather than a liability, you want to own an asset, because an asset typically, an asset class proposition enables you to trigger and create recurring revenue. Now, the fascinating thing about the BYD and Octopus Energy thing is that they're leasing an EV, and therefore you don't own the battery, and you as the lessor, the customer of that BYD car, through this system, you won't enjoy or get any of the direct benefit of the energy trading, but what you will get is a period of free mileage. That's part of the package. And it's particularly generous with BYD and Octopus, because you get a free bi-directional charger as well. And the cost of those, from what I can tell, from what I heard in Munich, you can't quote me because it's what I heard, but is anything between £1,500 and £2,000. Now, you're going to have to save quite a lot of energy value to get that payback to work. So how this all shakes down over time, I'm not sure. But I kind of think the Octopus and BYD model looks most interesting, because they're subsidizing the cost of their car by capturing the potential value of the energy transit, of the energy management arbitrage. And so therefore Octopus win, BYD win, and the customer wins. That's a good setup. And we think about it again, without going too much on it all, Nick, but these are two industries that haven't changed for well over 100 years. The energy industry, the mobility industry. For 100 years, they've kind of been the same. So the reason why they're changing now is because there is a different value proposition to be had. There is a different business model, a different cake, and people want a slice of that cake. So I would even be as bold as to say, this isn't about climate change anymore, just. This isn't about air quality, just. This is now about a new cake and people wanting a slice of it, because it's a new business model, and it could be, and I think will be, very lucrative.
Well, to that, let's cut into the cake a little bit. My next question, I'm kind of curious about what's happening in the world of battery chemistries. What's changing to kind of be able to harness these things we're talking about, whether it's grid storage or mobility?
Do you want me to answer, Puneet, or do you want to say something?
Go ahead, Roger.
Okay. As I think I've mentioned, it may be in the notes, etc., probably clear to people already, to be honest, Nick. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a specialist. I am a collector of people, storyteller, etc., etc. There are two words I learnt at Ricardo, where I worked for a number of years amongst brilliant engineers. And those two words are the answer to the question, what works best? So when it comes to what battery chemistry, what cell format, whatever, life cycle, so on and so forth, the two-word answer is always, it depends. So it depends on the application. It depends on the environment. It depends on the cost. It depends on what you need it to do. Excuse me. Depends on the business model, in other words. So when people talk about, a bit like people used to talk with alternatives to Tesla, oh, this is the killer Tesla model. I mean, it's rubbish, because it depends. For, I think, a lot of vehicles now around the world, increasingly so in Europe, interestingly, wasn't the case for a while, LFP is the battery of choice. Why? Because it delivers a good enough energy density. It didn't in the past. A good enough energy density now, because we've got better charging proposition. The beginning of the electric revolution was biggest battery possible, longest range possible, because charging isn't very good. I'm nervous, I get range anxiety. But there is a migration, a maturity of the charging infrastructure getting better, and that being able to benefit batteries to be less energy dense and smaller. But the other benefit, of course, of LFP in particular is there's no nickel and there's no cobalt. And both of those have challenges, not insurmountable, but they do have challenges, particularly in the popular storytelling of all of this, particularly cobalt, that has put people off and has worried people and concerned people. So when you see the rise of LFP as a particular chemistry, LiFePO4, when you see that, this is a positive story for everybody, consumer, manufacturer, and everybody, quite honestly. So that would be my initial comment on chemistry. Now, Puneet, you know more because I've heard you talk about it more. And by the way, when I saw Puneet on stage amongst many really, really good presenters with lots of knowledge and information, what I liked about Puneet was his ability to come to the point. And he was, wonderfully succinct. And I'd never met him in my life, but, and I don't want to be disrespectful to other speakers, but Puneet definitely stood out for me. Because it's hard to explain complex things without just talking like a boffin. That being said, Puneet, you know a lot about battery chemistry.
Thanks for your kind words, Roger. So let me start with telling a story. So, whenever I hear the conversation or think about the conversation about materials and chemistries for battery, automatically my mind goes back to 2009 timeframe. That was the time I was working for GM in General Motors R&D, and on a daily basis, R&D at GM and R&D team, we were thinking about this 300-mile vehicle, right? How is it going to be possible, right? Because that time, batteries roughly cost around $1,000 per kilowatt hour, and to make it 300-mile EVs, we always scratched our heads. How is that ever going to happen? Because the battery itself is going to cost more than the car was costing that time. And that's where we started, right? And I don't want people to forget that in those 15 years, the battery energy density, that means how much charge you get per kg of battery, has gone up by 3 times. And the cost has come down by 90%. Right? I mean, things that we could not imagine, even in our wildest dream back in 2008, 2009, is happening today. And people are not even breaking the sweat for that. So this is all happening for many, many reasons. But one of the reasons is all the work that electrochemists and all kind of R&D folks and engineering folks and manufacturing folks across all the companies have done to mature the technology, to mature the chemistries and everything. So the fact that they have done it, I have no doubt that track will continue. But if we look back as why we are looking for new chemistries, at the end of the day, if in the context of an electric vehicle, if you are looking to take away range anxiety, there are 3 things that are needed. You need a battery that has a lot of energy. You want that battery to be charged fast, and then you want those charges to be available easily. So if you have those three things, the whole conversation about, hey, how will I charge? EV can be my first car or second car. That conversation goes away if those three things are addressed, right? I'm gonna leave the frequency of chargers available aside, because that is a critical part of it, right? You can have best battery chemistry that can be charged very fast, but if you don't have chargers, you still have the same problem. So that is something that's where the energy companies come into play. That's where a lot of companies who are following Tesla model by putting their own superchargers and increasing those availability of chargers is an important part. But now if you come back to the two things, which is, hey, can I pack in more energy in the same volume of battery? And can I do that in a way that not only I pack a lot of energy, I can charge it fast as well? And those are the two key areas, in addition to the life and safety of the battery. Those are the three dimensions upon which all the new chemistries needs to be evaluated and the need for them coming. So as Roger said, right now, LFP chemistry is most used chemistry in terms of vehicles, because a lot of that is coming from China. China is predominantly based on LFP, or China EVs are based a lot more on the LFP chemistry, because LFP chemistry is much cheaper per kilo, because the materials are a lot more cheaper that goes in there, iron, and it can be charged fast, and it has reasonable amount of energy density. It's not the most energy dense chemistry, but reasonable enough that it can work in a practical scenario. But if you look, the new need of chemistry, those are the dimension every company is working on. Can you pack more energy while making sure this is safe, right? If you look at the solid state chemistry, what QuantumScape is working, many other companies are working on, they are looking to change those chemistries so that you can put more energy density and charge fast without jeopardizing the safety or the life of battery. If you look at the other dimension is sodium ion battery, which is, again, instead of using lithium, they want to use sodium. It is cheaper, it is safer, energy-wise the same. So one school of thought is, hey, for various applications, perhaps you don't need a lot more energy in the same amount of volume, but you want it to be cheaper, perhaps want to be longer lasting and safer, like energy storage applications. Sodium ion battery becomes an important element of that. And the third thing is in the middle of the two, the way I look at it, which is, hey, you like LFP chemistry because it is cheaper, it doesn't rely on kind of materials like nickel and cobalt. It can be charged fast, but can you increase the energy density? And that's what a lot of companies are also working on, is can you increase the energy that you are packing in LFP today? And then, of course, there is a whole spectrum that comes around it. So this is an active area of investment and again, it needs to be, as Roger said, it depends for what application. The kind of applications you're looking for, a EV or a large truck is very different than the kind of battery and the requirement they need to have for two-wheeler or a micro-mobility application or for energy density applications. So long story short, my point is there's no one chemistry that's going to win over everything. It depends on the application and the usage profile and the duty cycle and the consumer demand that's going to drive. The good news is industry has come around and significantly matured in terms of its understanding, its commercialization of various chemistries, and is taking the practical next steps to build on those things, be it improving the energy density, going down some new chemistry like solid state or manganese-rich materials, or trying to make it a lot more longer lasting, safer, going down the sodium ion route, or anything in the middle.
Yeah. Nick, I was looking up something as Puneet was talking there about this change over time and this focus on different battery chemistries and where we are, etc. Can I just read a quote for you? I'm going to test you both, sure, and anyone listening to the podcast to know the answer to this. So I'm going to ask the question, who was Elon Musk talking about back in 2009, May of 2009, when he said this company, the company I'm going to test you on, is also the leading edge in the field of sustainable mobility. Among others, the lithium-ion pouch cell battery developed by this company and especially designed for automotive applications is of interest to us. We are looking forward to a strategic cooperation in a number of areas, including leveraging this company's engineering, production, and supply chain expertise. So that's Elon Musk, the principal architect of the electric revolution, in 2009, talking about who do you think?
If I have to guess, I will guess CATL. Am I? No?
Good guess. I understand why you said that. Nick?
I'm at a loss.
Okay. Daimler. Mercedes.
Oh.
Yes, oh. So back in 2009, one of the leaders in terms of the ambition towards electrification wasn't Chinese, including battery development. It was German. So one of the questions, which I think I know the answer to without wanting to sound like a smart ass, is that, well, what happened? How can this be so? And then add to this other things like, when did A123 battery factory open in Livonia in the United States near Detroit? I can tell you, 2011, 2 years after this. And if you look, there's a period of time where in the West, in Europe and America, we were developing battery technology and chemistry. We were developing the constituent parts of the electric vehicle, and then we stopped. It's a fascinating story. A bit of that story, by the way, because I'm an avid reader, I like to read, is in this book, The Great Race. So this book was published 10 years ago by Levi Tillerman, The Global Quest for the Car of the Future. It's a very, very good book. And if I then add it to this book, Volt Rush, by Henry Sanderson, talking about batteries and raw materials, etc., and I add it to this book, Totaled, which is the story of the rise and fall of battery swapping and Better Place. They are all threaded through those books, and all part of this story of change and challenge is a really intriguing story of political interference, mismanagement, vision, passion, a whole bunch of different things depending upon where you were in the world at any moment in time. So as Puneet kindly mentioned right at the beginning, this is the stuff that I've been chronicling. This is what it's like a film. It's like being in a movie. Honestly, it really is.
Could you talk a little bit to that change, Roger? Have you heard anything about what companies are doing with these new supply chains and new materials in the market? You mentioned a little bit about the influx of Chinese EVs in the European market being a big blow to German automakers. What about taking a step lower and looking at some of the suppliers? How's that changing the supplier network?
Well, frustratingly not, and it should and it must. So, for example, battery factories, Northvolt, 15, 16 billion euros, nothing, been and gone. You've got Freya in Norway, both in Norway and the United States, nothing. I think they're involved in a photovoltaic cells now. And you have companies like Verkor, French company, really smart battery outfit in what they're doing. PowerCo, part of the massive German enterprise, etc. But they're not there yet. They're not over the line. They're not up and running at capacity, spilling out lots of batteries. They're trying to be there. And then you add into that fact that even if they're given more support and typically money to get going, where is the critical mineral supply chain? Where are the raw ingredients, particularly when it comes to processing those minerals? And if I can, I'll just replay the bit I said right at the beginning when I had a moment in time that was a revelation back in the spring of 2019. It was when I heard a guy called Simon Moores, the founder of a little company most people never heard of then, called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. But Simon was well known in the industry and had been called to give evidence to the US Senate Energy Committee. And as he sits in this room with all these senators trying to work out, what's going on in the world, he uttered these words, which were so prescient, where we are today. He said, "We are in the midst of a global battery arms race, of which the United States is a bystander." And he then went on to give some metrics around, how much, for example, graphite was produced in America and how much was processed in America. And he said, well, graphite, you've got it in the ground in countries like Brazil, Madagascar, various other places around the world, but as good as 100% of it is processed in China. So he went through these numbers, and just to finish my point, this was the bit that really got me focusing on mining and minerals and batteries. He said, those that control these critical mineral supply chains will control the destiny of the 21st century industrial landscape. If that isn't, that's like a movie. If that isn't a call to arms, I don't know what is. And yet, not much has happened since that time. We've had the Inflation Reduction Act, we've had the battery passport, we've had various edicts and things that have kind of come along. But look at where they are with, the stuff in America. You have one president who's all for it, one president who's not. Not without naming all the names, we know who they are. But yeah, for me, that's the revelation. And the reality here is we have to have a vertically integrated supply chain of batteries, both from the critical minerals and the manufacture of the batteries within Europe, if we want in any way, shape or form to compete, particularly with the Chinese.
Thank you, Roger and Puneet. This has been a great conversation so far, but I think we should leave the rest for part 2. We'll be back soon with Roger Aktins of Electric Vehicles Outlook to talk about critical materials, battery passports, and the global supply chains. Thank you to the audience, and we hope to have you back soon. For more information, be sure to check out our past episodes of the Battery Podcast. Head over to our website, siemens.com/battery, for even more. And don't forget to subscribe so that you get new episodes when they air. This podcast contains the personal views and opinions of the speakers. It is important to note that these opinions are solely those of the speakers and do not reflect the views or positions of Siemens, its management, its employees, or any entities the speakers may be affiliated with. Siemens as a company does not endorse any of these statements made in the podcast. Siemens bears no responsibility for ensuring the content's accuracy or verifying the statements made in this podcast.